It is 5 o'clock somewhere, and you've tuned in to BRC. As you can see from the background, I am live in New York City. Today on the show, we have author Robin Robinson here to talk about his new book, The History of Whiskey. So kick off your shoes, pour yourself a dram, and stay tuned for Robin Robinson up next. Now open, Barrel Room Chronicles online whiskey shop, where every bottle tells a story.
Salangeva.
Like Richard Patterson's Timeless Scotch at the Dalmore, Rachel Berry's Elegant Malts from the Glendronach, Glenrioch, and Glenglassa, or the bold Nevada bourbon of Ashley and Colby Frey. From Hemingway Rye's Call Family Legacy to Bernard Walsh's Poetic Irish Whiskey and the Scully family's Coastal Clonakilty, these aren't just spirits, they're stories, and they pour neat. BRC Whiskey Shop, the drams we talk about, now delivered. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to say afternoon. Usually I say whatever time it is, but obviously we are out in the bright sunshine here in New York City, and I have the pleasure of actually meeting Robin Robinson in person. We've had him on the show before, back when it was Spirits of Whiskey, back during the lockdown, where we talked about his first book. But today I came out to New York just for the day, just to speak to this gentleman.
Oh, man.
And I got this beautiful location. So here we are. Robin, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. And thanks for having me. And thanks for picking such a fabulous backdrop.
No, it's great.
Yeah. It's not AI generated. It's actually real.
It's real. It's real. Except for now my glasses are dark because they're transitional, but that's all right. So we're going to talk about a couple things. First off, welcome back to the show. It's been quite some time, about 5 years since we've had you on.
Thank you.
And I'm very glad that we could do it in person this time now that we're not in the lockdown. The last time we had you on, we talked about your first book. This time we're talking about your new book, which comes out October 21st?
21st.
October 21st. And we're going to have a little sippy sips.
That's nothing wrong with that.
It's not anything that's in your book, but it's something that relates to your book.
It's close.
Yes. So
same company.
Cheers.
Kampai.
Kampai. Okay.
Yeah,
Kampai. Right. So first, well, we have to take let's do that. Nothing like a good whiskey in the afternoon. All right. So let's talk about the book. So when did you decide to write this book? Was it immediately after the last book? And how did you come up with the idea for this one?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I had been going back and forth on what would be the follow-up to the complete whiskey course. And I thought, well, maybe it would be a revised edition of that. I also have sort of in the back of my mind and somewhere up on the internet, I've got all types of drafts of a graphic novel on whiskey. But my former editor actually contacted me and said, hey, I've got this idea about like a history book for whiskey. What do you think? And we started batting some ideas back and forth. And he said, can we do it like with like a bunch of objects, like, like the history of the world and 100 objects? And I said, yeah, well, it would have to be kind of like, bottles and then barrels and then vessels, because bottles only go back 150 or so years.
Right.
So eventually we came up with the idea of the history of whiskey in 100 bottles, barrels, and more, because somebody in the sales department didn't like the word vessels.
Vessels isn't a very romantic word.
Oh, yeah. But it actually was accurately described stuff that holds other things.
Very true. Very true.
Anyway, it turned out like that.
Yeah. So in the book, you start off with like prehistoric times practically.
Yeah.
And you go all the way up to current
today.
Times. Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to do the research for this book?
Well, I will tell you, the research has been going on for years. I started getting interested in whiskey back in the 1980s. I started putting together educational things for friends of mine back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I kept all that stuff. When I got into the industry in 2008 with Compass Box, then I got deeper into it and then started teaching, which is still a whiskey class at the Astor Center in New York City.
Right. 16
years now.
Wow.
So it just, the research just keeps going on. You keep getting deeper. When I did the first book, I traveled all over the world from India to Japan to Scotland and Ireland. Scotland and Ireland, I've been back and forth many times. Kentucky. So I've been deeply invested in this for many, many years. And so I drew on a lot of that old research that I
Right.
had, and then I added to it this time by actually hanging out with archivists.
Really?
Yeah, because
That's
this
cool.
really was about the deep down history. It wasn't really as much about how do you make the whiskey, how do you age the whiskey, but let's go down deep into where was the origins of this.
Right.
And so I end up in museums, in libraries, in archives, hanging out with people who spend most of their time with white gloves on, and have never seen daylight.
Right.
And that was a whole other aspect of it. It was, then you really kind of feel like there's a little bit of
Validity? I don't know.
well, no, and there's an archaeological
Oh, yes.
aspect to this.
Yeah.
There's an ethnographic aspect to this. Whiskey doesn't occur in a vacuum. As I say in the introduction, it was part and parcel of life events. It was a witness to some events. In some cases, it was a catalyst. But it takes place, with the rest of humanity going forward. And that's what I was trying to capture with this. And that's why I go back to antiquity
Yeah.
with the pot.
I think it was very interesting. I think it was maybe a little bit serendipitous that we connected about this when we did, because as we talked last week, when I was on the plane coming back out to the East Coast to going to DC, and I spent the day at Arlington Cemetery,
Yeah.
and I took the little tour, and in one of the museum things there, they had the Quake, the Scottish
A quake.
And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so I was looking on, and I was like, okay. And then hours later, I'm back on the plane and talking to you, and you're sending me a digital copy of the book to read. And I was like, oh, I just saw one of these.
And there's a quake in there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I actually, believe it or not, this is going to sound morbid in some other context, but I spend a lot of time in cemeteries.
It's not morbid. It's beautiful there.
No, it is. It's not only beautiful, but that's really where a lot of history gets written. I live in a part of New Jersey that is an ancient Dutch area. I found an old cemetery that actually has the headstones in Dutch.
Oh, wow.
Or German or whatever that language they were speaking. And so typically if I go to some city somewhere, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look up what the local cemetery is and go take a walk through there, because that's when you find, like, for example, Hodeling, right? Hodeling, who appears in here about his warehouse and is the name of a company right now that
Right.
is an importer of spirits. I found his graveyard
Oh, really?
in upstate New York.
Oh, interesting.
I was in a town, and I said, "Oh, here's a really neat old churchyard right here," and I came across Hought, so they spelled it in the old school way of Hodeling, and I found his whole family there. So I said, "Oh my God, that's just like one of the best discoveries in the world."
It is great.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a little snippet we did on the Cocktail Guru when Jonathan and Jeffrey were out and about. They did some summer follies last year, and they spent some time in the cemetery and found a whole bunch of very interesting people.
It's just wonderful. Cemeteries, libraries, museums. I remember being over here at the New York Public Library. I had been running down something called the Whiskey Ring.
Okay.
Now, the Whiskey Ring was before the Whiskey Trust, and the Whiskey Ring was essentially the first example of political corruption involving whiskey.
Yeah.
And it happened during the second term of Ulysses S. Grant. And it was
America, corruption, and the government.
Oh, no, that would never happen.
No.
Yeah, right. No. Man, going up that far? No. But I had tracked all these little pieces of information down, and then I'm in the library and I find the book written by the one man who did time for that. It was
wow.
General John McDonald. He was one of Grant's generals, right? And he was the only guy that actually got convicted, did time. And this was just so beautiful. In the introduction of the book, he describes the events that led up to that. And then he said, and so I appealed my conviction to the powers that be and mentioned that if I'm not absolved of this, I will name names. And within 17 months, he was sprung out of jail.
Sounds like something else, Carl.
Yeah, it just keeps repeating itself, right? And he writes this book 10 years later, and I'm in the library in the Rose Room, and I'm reading this, and I start giggling, and I'm getting all these people go, shh, 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 shh.
You're like, but
Yeah,
look,
but
it's
you don't
the
know what it
same.
is I just found. So
That's
it
hysterical.
gets really kind of exciting like that. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so when I know the research has been going on forever, but when did you talk to the editor and they said, okay, you want to do this? And you said yes. And from that date until now?
I had 1 year.
1 year, okay.
I had 1 year, and I had 50,000 words. So that was the restriction put on me. Because my first book, I had no idea what I was doing. So after many mental breakdowns of I can't do it, I finally did it. And I went 3 times over the word count. And and so in that respect, I said, okay, I'm going to stay with the word count. 100 stories, I've given 50,000 words. Each one of these has to be at the 500 word mark, more or less.
Okay.
So I was actually very proud of myself. I learned how to write much more succinctly, tighter. I learned how to kill my darlings. Like that is the most magnificent paragraph I've ever written in my life. It's got to go. Yeah, right.
It's like when you're a director in film and you got to cut out the best scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to cut. Yeah, exactly. So I learned how to do that. Yeah.
So let's talk about the format of the book.
Yeah.
So it's not written in a normal fashion, I would guess. You have it's basically chronological order from the beginning of time to now about whiskey and where whiskey came from, even before whiskey was whiskey.
Yeah.
And it's told in 100 different stories.
It's 100 different stories, and each one of these bottles, barrels, and more are portals into some aspect of the history of not just whiskey, which only goes back 500 years, but of distilling, and even before distilling. What were the ideas? What were the anthropological seeds that got us to the point where we realized if we put this together and this together and this together, and we're going to get this? And that comes from many, many different directions. So I had to go find a beginning point.
Right.
And that was the pot. So the book starts out at a pot that looks like a gourd.
Okay.
Because we use the word today, cucurbit.
Right.
So cucurbit is what describes the bottom pot of a pot still. And cucurbit is the genus of gourds and pumpkins and cucumbers from the Latin word, and that describes that. So when you put the cucurbit together, and then God knows how many thousands of years later, someone put another pot on top of it, and that came from the Arabic alembic, which means pot, and now you actually have your pot still. So for me, getting back to the beginning ideas of how this all came together, I thought was incredibly important. Otherwise, everything's out of context.
Right.
So I wanted to build it up from there. So this is how you put something in a pot, and you put something else in there, you put something else in there, and then you get something different.
Right. You
get a stew, you get a soup, you get a collaboration of flavors. Well, yeah, that sounds like a mash bill to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So what is I know you had years and years of research of other things, but when you started doing the research for these 100 stories, was there one particular story that you came across that you didn't know about yet and were like, whoa, I got to put that in the book because that's really interesting?
Well, one of them was that.
Okay.
Was the one about the whiskey ring.
Okay.
I had little itses and bitses of all kinds of stories floating in my head, and all kinds of notes that I had taken before, which I drew from. It's when I ended up going into one area thinking, oh, I know where this story is going. Oh, wait a minute. That's not the story at all. The story is over here.
Yeah.
That's when the surprises came. One of them, for example, was I knew about the end of Irish whiskey.
Sadly.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And I knew what the factors were that brought about the end of Irish whiskey. There were about 6 or 7 of them in all. But what I didn't know was how it got revived, how it came back together, how the IDL, right, how the Irish Distillers Limited was formed, and it was formed from a secret meeting of a secret meeting. Okay. We're up high, no one can hear us. It was a secret meeting between the last generation of power, the last generation of Jameson, and the last generation of Murphy's.
Yes. Okay.
Those three, they met in secret over many different occasions, and realized we're going to lose this whole thing, because we've been competing with each other down to the death for the domestic market of Ireland, right? And it's killing us, and we're going to lose this whole thing. And that's when they said, we have to join forces and now be as one. And then they got the Irish government to back them. And then they did, when the IDL was formed, they did bring Bushmills in for a while. Then Bushmills left after a while. And then they got this influx of money from Pernod Ricard. And Pernod Ricard, I tell you what, I got to give them props, especially in that part of their corporate life, because they not only did that for Irish whiskey, they did it for Canadian whiskey too.
They sure did.
They rescued Canadian whiskey, right? So that was really interesting to find out how that came about. And then, of course, what's interesting is that you become a monopoly.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have someone like John Teeling.
The Teelings.
Right. John Teeling, who in the book, what a great guy to interview.
Coolly.
I was broke, married, and a student. Mm-hmm. And no way to start a company. But he writes his Harvard PhD, his dissertation on ancient Irish whiskeys, and brings back the whole idea. It's not just pot still style, right? It's not just this blend. It's these other formations, and that's how Cooley comes into being. And then that revitalizes it even more. And of course, now Irish whiskey is like, you've got 45, 50 different distilleries.
Yeah, it's blown up in the last 5 years, especially. But it's
especially in Northern Ireland. Boy, a lot from Northern Ireland, right? It used to be just Bushmills up there.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing about Bushmills, we know the date that's on the label has nothing to do with anything, right? So those things, right? Getting underneath. I got a feeling that any of you corporate types that are out there going to read this, I got a feeling this is going to push against a lot of what is market speak out there. But like I say in the introduction, I'm a storyteller first. And then it's a storyteller based in factuality. And when it came to areas in which seemed like it was really gray, I started following. If I get 3 different independent viewpoints that lead me in that direction, that's the direction where it's probably going to go.
Right.
And if that actually makes the best story, then that's where I'm going to go. So a lot of it's going to be a little bit counter to what the official stories are out there, but I'll stand behind it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite story in the book?
Oh, boy, that's a tough one.
I like to throw out the tough questions.
I know. Of all my children,
what's your favorite?
Oh, well, I've only have one child, but she's my favorite.
Then she's your favorite.
Yeah. Boy, I don't know. There were just so many really wonderful surprises. My most personal is my visit to Talisker.
Okay.
And I realized that I'm going to be in this whiskey industry somehow in my life. This was back in the late 90s.
Right.
Oh, I tell you, one of my favorite stories is Golden Wedding Rye.
What's that?
Yeah, right. What's that? Well, right now you can find some stores, and if you look way down on the back of the bottom shelf, you're going to find Golden Wedding, but it's going to be hard.
That one.
Golden Wedding Rye probably is the one whiskey that traces American whiskey right from the very beginning. Because it started out as Western Pennsylvania rye whiskey. Okay. And Western Pennsylvania was where whiskey actually was first commercialized with rye, with the Overholds. And then the Monongahela River that they were on became the locus of this style of whiskey that people started making, and it became known as Monongahela rye. Well, there's 3 rivers in Pittsburgh, Monongahela, Allegheny, and Ohio, and it doesn't really matter which one you're on. You can call it Monongahela rye. So up on the Allegheny River was this one distillery, and it got taken over by another guy, and they started making a whiskey called Golden Wedding there. And that brand was a perfect example of how to trace the corporate influence
Oh, yeah.
of how these modified brands and how brands travel. It must have gone to 7 or 8 different companies.
Wow.
It's actually in the hands of Sazerac right now.
I've never heard of it. Maybe we don't get it on the West Coast.
You don't get it on the West Coast. It probably has very limited. It may only be actually in Canada right now because it's primarily made in Canadian distilleries, but that'll give you an idea about how far it's traveled.
Yeah.
But it was, to me, it was like, wow, this is really the wake-up call about corporate ownership of brands and how they're just traded right and left. And, when you think about the Van Winkles and the Beams were owned by a company, right, called American Brands, later called Fortune Brands. And the other things that they owned were Kohler sinks and Titleist golf balls.
Okay.
It was awesome.
You're going to go golfing with your whiskey and then go wash your hands.
And then go wash your hands. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, right. That would, you know what? You would have been the influencer for that one.
All right, let's go golfing, and then we're going to have our whiskey, and then we have to wash our hands.
Yeah. But here we are on the golf course, wash our hands through a Kohler pump that's pumping out bean whiskey. There you go. That's how you put it all together.
Better.
Yeah. But that was...
It'd be great when you're at every hole you go to, you just kind of go up to the little faucet and you just refill your cup. And
it's much better than that tank of old water that they have.
Right.
Let me tell you. Yeah. The ball washing takes on a whole completely different perspective.
It's very sterile now. It's very sterile. It's very clean.
But that was a great example of like corporate ownership, and all the Scotch whiskeys. I mean, the Scotch whiskeys have gone through so much corporate ownership.
Oh, yeah.
And then the rise of the DCL, right? The Distillers Company Limited, which was essentially came from the first families of whiskey. And the first families of whiskey go back, well, depends on how far you want to go back. A knight named Petrus de Haga is one of the knights that accompanied William the Conqueror during the invasion of Normandy in 1066.
I'm like, that wasn't that long ago, but that's a different.
Oh, that was different Normandy.
Normandy, yeah.
They went the other way.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
And then that de Haga eventually became the name Hague.
Okay.
And then Hagues actually became very, very politically and culturally integrated into the lowlands of Scotland. And when they met up with a family called the Steens, who had been around, Hagues and Steens became the first families of whiskey.
Wow.
And from them came the Jamesons.
And this was all in Ireland, yes?
No, this is Scotland.
Scotland first?
No, Scotland first. And then one of the Steens jumped across the channel, landed in Dublin, opened up a distillery on Bow Street.
Okay.
Right. And then a little bit later, his newly married nephew came over, and that was John Jameson the first. And he took over as manager, then bought the distillery. And now was Jameson and then Jameson and Sons.
Okay.
So you see how all of this, and then what the Hagues and the Steens eventually became the DCL that is now today's Diageo.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
I want to know, though, how is it, and you probably know this, and I should know this, how is it that we are getting so many French names over whiskey things like Diageo and Pinot Required? Aren't those?
Well, Diageo is actually it's a portmanteau.
What does that mean?
A portmanteau is when 2 words come together to create a third word.
Okay.
Like motel is motor hotel.
Right.
Okay. What this was is dia, which means day, and geo, which means the world. And essentially what they're saying is that all over the world every day. In other words, we're going to take over the world. Yeah. That was, and essentially you have to bring consultants in. Oh, here's another great one. Here's another great part of the story. Consultants, of which I am in real life.
Right.
Right. So I know the destruction that we can havoc. So Irish distillers. The IDL is actually formulated now in Ireland. What are we going to do? Okay. Well, now we actually have to take this whiskey out of Ireland. Now we're going to export this. Okay. So where are we going to export it? Well, United States seems to be the biggest market, so we're definitely going to go to the United States, right? So they bring in a team of consultants because what they've got is Jameson, Power, and they've got Cork Distillers here, right? At that time, Power was the most popular whiskey in all of Ireland. Okay. And they figure, okay, well, Power is going to be a natural for this, right? But they bring in a team of consultants, and the consultants do what consultants do, right? They go out there and pick up information from outside the world and find out at that particular time in the late 60s, right? And in the early 70s, and it, kind of the word power had negative connotations.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of different, there's Soviet power, and over in the United States, they're having a problem with over there, right? Power may not work. You know what? The nod's going to Jameson. Now, the best part of that was when Jameson, I think about maybe 20 years ago, they started advertising heavily when you could do that on TV.
Right.
And there was these commercials, really elaborately staged commercials of John Jameson himself diving overboard and rescuing a barrel of whiskey that had fallen off the boat, and he drags it onto shore, and it's like, you know, this whole thing about purity. Here's the beauty behind this. Jameson says, so Jameson hated the column still so much when it was invented by another Irishman, Aeneas Coffey, that he wrote a 90-page screed.
Wow.
Okay. It was called The Truths About Whiskey, and published it. And they accused the column still of everything from corrupting your children to poisoning your family to stealing your wife away. It was the worst thing in the world, right? Column still was the worst thing in the world. Pot still whiskey, that's the only way to make it. That chased coffee out of Ireland. I can't sell my invention here. The Scots said, dude.
Loved it. Yeah,
Scots, dude, bring it on, right? This right here is an example of the Tokai. Is an example of how important that was, because this is all essentially column still whiskey. So they bring it over to Scotland, right? And then when when Pernod Ricard takes over the IDL, one of the first things they started to do was change the formulation of the original pot still Jameson and Powers, and they both became a blended whiskey with grain whiskey in it. And I can just imagine John Jameson turning around in his grave when that happened. You know, I mean, hey, it's the number 7. It's one of the top 7 most consumed spirits in the world.
Yeah.
So they did pretty well for themselves.
Yeah, but you know, you never want to. I don't know. You never want to change. That's what gets me with corporate stuff. They're let's find a cheaper way to make it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you could have this great product, and then you've changed the flavor profile, and you're lucky if it hits. If it hits, great. Which luckily for them it did. But you know, I've had a few grain whiskeys that are pretty good, but overall, I'm more of a more malted.
I'm a massive fan of grain whiskey. I've got some, being with Compass Box for those many years, the original Hedonism was grain whiskeys. And so I got to taste some absolutely spectacular stuff with John Glazer at the time in some warehouses, and like I was bowled over by it. So yeah, there's some out there that are really great. I'm a malt whiskey person myself. You know, that's kind of where I cut my teeth. Yeah. Smoky malt whiskey. You know, Talisker.
I like the smoky. I don't like the smoky.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking earlier about the Band-Aid flavor.
Oh, the Band-Aid flavor.
Band-Aid iodine and smoke is not.
Yeah, Band-Aid and iodine and a little bit of kelp. Oh man, you had me.
Yeah, see, I like it when it's really light on the peat and it just tastes like a really good barbecue, and you should be having the barbecue.
Well, that was kind of like how Talisker actually, how I got it. Yeah, because Talisker actually has that's a little bit of oyster shells. It's got, you know, a little peach in there. You know, it was just this gorgeous blend of flavors, and it was just entrancing. You know, I think there's a whiskey out there for everyone. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's just you have to, you know, a lot of people jump into the deep end of the pool, you know, like a 10-year-old Lefroy. Guess what, man? You ain't coming back out.
No, I've met some people they cut themselves on a Lefroy or an Ardbeg
Not
first,
gonna happen.
and
And nowadays we have a big thing about hazmat whiskeys, which is a whiskey way above proof.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in bourbons. I got news for you, pal. I just did that in hazmat whiskey. I can't use my nose anymore for another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So
it's done.
I love it going to whiskey festivals and about 9 o'clock at night. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going, dude, I know you can't smell a thing.
That's great.
Because you've been snorting up high proof whiskeys through that glass all night long.
Okay. So Robin, are you going to go on a book tour with this bad boy?
I hope so. Yeah. The first book that came out, I did a book tour that was combined with a bunch of whiskey tastings. So I'm going to do a variation of that. I'm going to call it The History of Whiskey, 60 minutes of bad stand-up comedy punctuated by drinking.
Great.
And hopefully I'll get some...
Won't be that bad then.
No, yeah. Boy, if you're expecting bad stand-up comedy, believe me, I will fulfill your dream. I just do nothing but puns throughout the entire thing. Remember, we're entertainers first. And then, if lucky, we can actually, throw a little bit of knowledge under the or above the transom or underneath the door when no one's looking. Everyone walks out thinking I got something good, but at least I got a couple laughs, and that's really the whole.
Yeah, it's great to get laughs.
Yeah.
I mean, not when you're not trying to get laughs. But I meant to do that.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like one of my old stand-up comedy routines. No. That was actually I meant to.
I meant to do that. Yeah. Oopsie. Okay. So, do you have plans for a third book? And if so, do you know what it's going to be about yet?
Yeah. Actually, it's been rolling. I always thought it was going to be my first book, so it's still rolling around, and I actually have. I will tell you this, only that it is going to be a graphic novel.
Okay. Yes, that's cool.
It will be about whiskey. That's all I can reveal right now. I've got all of the pages that I've done. I've actually done all the drawings myself.
Oh, you can draw?
Okay, well, you can actually say, can you draw when you see them? And then you can make the decision from there.
I can't draw.
Yeah, okay. I can scribble, and I'm a good paleontological cartoonist, which means you can barely understand that that's a human figure.
Got it.
Yeah, but yeah, they're all up on some like shared drive somewhere with a lock and key, and only I can see them until I'm ready to kind of like,
And
bring
do you
them
have
together.
the whole story fleshed out already?
Kind of, and what it is a romanically.
Oh.
It's really about, it's about what's going on right now, all through whiskey's history to right now. And I'm going to name names, name drop.
Yeah,
but in a romanically, it's not going to be the same name.
Right.
Yeah. Do you remember reading a blog years ago called the Whiskey Sponge?
Yes.
I love that guy. He was brilliant, and he just took everybody in the whiskey industry to task, right? Of all of the goofy, things that was going on in the whiskey industry, but he changed all their names. So to avoid, prosecution.
Right.
That's going to be kind of the idea behind this.
How many pages or
Good
pictures
question.
you have already?
Oh, already I've got like 30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it tells a slice of the story of whiskey. But I would say but it incorporates, for example, one of the things that brought whiskey to its renaissance was it coincided with the beginning of the renaissance of cocktails.
Nice.
So you can't ever separate the two of them together. The other thing that was part of the perfect storm was the DIY culture that erupted because of the internet.
Yes.
The internet suddenly brought us information and how-tos. And the whole idea of do it yourself became really embedded in the American psyche at that time.
It sure did. In the late 90s, I was working for the Home Depot.
Okay.
And
perfect.
The amount of business that went through that place was, because everybody was, I'm going to do it myself. And we had so many people doing it themselves. And, when I go to Home Depot now, I'm like, there's not very many people in here.
Yeah, because they're all home doing. Yeah, they're actually getting it from Amazon. They're still doing it at home. Yeah. Oh no, I'm having somebody else. Oh yeah, I've got it. I'll have AI do it for me.
Oh yeah, there you go.
But yeah,
it's going to be the robot that comes and hands.
There you go.
Right.
My neighbor with his robot grass cutter. It's like, oh my
God, that's great. I got to see that.
Yeah.
Send me a picture.
Yeah.
Video.
But yeah, so the DIY, the rebirth of cocktails. and that brought then the resurgence of, for example, I give the millennials an enormous amount of credit as being probably the most culinarily sophisticated generation that was ever born in America. We didn't have a flavor vocabulary before that.
No, not
To
really.
talk about food, to talk about drinks in those particular ways that we talk about them now was considered taboo. I was brought up in
I don't understand that. Why was that?
oh, well, I actually wrote a blog piece about this years ago,
Okay.
and it was actually prompted by a question that the chief blender at Suntory,
Okay.
he and I were having a conversation when he was on tour after they had acquired Bean. And he said, Americans are really so very smart. I've been on this United States tour. I've been asked questions about still sizes and capacity and grain varieties and relative humidity in the warehouse. Not one person asked me about flavor.
Huh.
And he was mystified by that.
Yeah.
And that set me off on this why. And then I realized, I grew up in Pittsburgh, right? I didn't see a stalk of fresh asparagus until I was 24 years old.
Oh, wow.
Asparagus came as this gloppy mass inside of a can. All of my rice came from some trolley car out in San Francisco, and all of my vegetables.
Rice-a-roni, the
Right.
San Francisco treat.
Right, and then some crazy chef in Italy had stuffed all kinds of stuff of pasta in a can, and some big giant green guy was overlooking all my vegetables.
Chef Boyardee, Jolly Green
Yeah,
Giant.
exactly,
I'm hearing.
right.
I'm hearing what you're putting.
Right. So we, and to talk about food was actually considered, well, you think you're better than me? Who the fuck do you think you are? Right. It was like, it was almost un-American. We had left our elitist past behind us. We were, to eat was to survive another day.
Yeah.
Right. So, just, meat and potatoes. That was the American. So, yeah. So all of a sudden, here comes this vocabulary. Here comes this chasing down of these old recipes from bartending manuals from the 19th century and from the early 20th century. All of this now brilliant new flavors, and then here come all this new group of people who want to do something with distilled spirits. And then DIY, and then, it all comes to, and that was the 21st century of all this.
Yeah.
Before that, no one talked about the history of whiskey.
No.
No one talked about it. Who cared? I'm a doer's guy. That's it. That's all you need to know. Yeah, right. So don't give me any of that Valentine's. I'm a doer's guy.
Yeah. That's the one thing I've really appreciated during my whiskey journey is when I first started drinking it, I just was like, isn't this a grandpa drink? And then I was like, oh, I actually like it. And then when I'd go to bars and I'd ask for whiskey, the bartender would look at me crazy.
Especially
And
because
then-
you're a woman.
Yes.
Yeah,
But, there wasn't a lot of talk about flavors and stuff
No.
in the beginning.
No.
So, yeah, I see. what
When I first learned, after I had that impactful event where I was impersonating a Scottish distiller and I got my first 4 whiskeys.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know the story, we'll put in the show notes the link to the original podcast where he tells the story.
Yeah.
That's right.
And what happened was I used to work down here at a place called Francis Tavern in New York City, and I was working the lunch shift, and I used to walk up the street to a bar called the North Star Tavern. And it was the first time I'd ever walked into a bar that had actually all of these Scotch whiskeys in them. And I said, oh, there's that one I had at that
is it
event.
still here?
North Star, it's gone.
It's gone.
It was down at the South Street Seaport.
Oh, there's a boat there.
The boat was still there then.
Okay.
Yeah, but the bar's gone.
Okay.
And
I think I've been on that boat.
yeah, but I came in, and every afternoon I would say, how do you pronounce that? And why are those both have the word Glen in it? Well, let me taste them both side by side. And so I'm learning from this bar what single malt Scotch whiskey is. What does all this mean, and what's pure mean, and what's double, and and I think the bartenders were learning along with me. So it became this sort of like afternoon event. 2 days out of the week, I would walk up from after my shift, and just sit down at the bar and just figure it out.
That's great.
Yeah.
I remember when I was first the beginning of my whiskey journey, and I was drinking some Glenfiddich. at the time it had a CH at the end, so I was saying Glenfiddich. And then I went to a Glenfiddich tasting and I was schooled, but that was early on, right? And then I remember so many instances since then when I go to a bar and I'm like, can I get the Glenfiddich? And they're like, oh, the Glenfiddich? And I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's right next to the Glenmorangie.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, no, it's Gaelic. It's got a cut.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are, and then, the whole bourbon thing, of course, bourbon meant when I was a kid, bourbon and rye meant two different things. In Pittsburgh, Canadian whiskey was rye.
Yep.
And that was VO and Imperial. And you were, if 17 years old and I'm at a wedding at the VFW hall and I look like I've got some hair on my face and the bartender's going, yeah, okay, kid, here, and he pours like a VO in there. Here's a shot of rye. Yeah, it had like 8% rye in there. Most of it is actually just, high distilled corn. But that's what rye was at that time. Bourbon was like, essentially there was, we thought Jack Daniels was a bourbon. We didn't know it. Essentially, technically it is. Jim Beam, white label, that was all there was. But you bought a cheap bottle of that if you were going to meet up with your friends and somebody's parents went out for the weekend, right? And you knew that you were just going to get sloshed that weekend.
It wasn't about flavor then. Yeah. It was about let's do something we're not supposed to.
Yeah. And then we drank, what we thought was tequila, but was actually at that time Cuervo Gold, all kinds of things. To kind of come out of that and then come into this world where there's this whole world out there now. These brands are starting to show up, and then you start going deeper and deeper behind the label, and you start, wow, man, that's like really a fascinating story, and that connects to that, and that connects to that, and then and that's kind of like what I tried to find here.
And I'm hoping that this book will help some of the younger generation, because I know that this new generation, they don't drink, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you shouldn't drink.
Yeah.
Obsessively.
Well, there's nothing wrong with drinking. It's just that you have to understand how to drink.
But I think a lot of it is that there's a lot of places where they can get the THC drinks now, or these other things, and they can try a lot more different things. And so, but I don't think they realize the journey that you can take in flavor profiles with beverages. Yeah. And so hopefully books like yours will help.
Well, one of the things that actually we talked about with my publisher is like how to market this. Okay, obviously the spirits industry, people are like whiskey, but this is a history book.
Right.
So this actually has a broader purview now. There are people who love history, love the idea of history, and this is going to fit perfectly into how they like to actually, encounter, the written word. So I hope it actually is appealing to both of them.
Well, I hope so too. Yeah. Robin, it has been fantastic. I can't wait till
Kerry,
your graphic novel comes out so we can talk about that.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you having me on.
It's a beautiful day. I'm actually starting to get a little warm.
I'm actually getting sunburned.
Yeah, I think when I get on the plane later, I'm going to be red on this side.
Yeah, it's called SPF 30.
I didn't think it was going to be like this. I mean, I have not been in New York at this time of year before, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's not too hot, not too cold. Well, it's starting to get a little warm, but anyway, Robin, thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the whiskey,
for meeting me on the 41st floor here of this lovely building.
Yeah. Am I signing this book for you?
Oh, yes. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Cheers.
Cheers. Salam Java. That does it for today's show. To read notes on this episode or learn more about our guests, please visit barrelroomchronicles.com. Want to interact with the show or have questions for our guests? Then ask them on our socials or send us an email. Or better yet, leave us a voicemail on our website. If you like what you heard, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. If you really liked it and you want to show your support, buy us a whiskey through our Ko-fi site at ko-fi.com/BRC or become an exclusive member of the Barrel Room Parlor. If you work in the whiskey or spirits industry or just have a deep passion for whiskey and want to share your spirits journey, register to be a guest through our website. Last but not least, please enjoy your spirits responsibly. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, Salam Java.
Barrel Room Chronicles is a production of First Reel Entertainment and is available on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.